The movie starts with a scene where a bright yellow egg yolk gets injected with a strange green liquid. Suddenly, the yolk breaks open and makes a perfect duplicate of it. After that, the scene shifts to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, zooming in on the star dedicated to the famous celebrity Elizabeth Sparkle. As time passes, we see fans gathering excitedly around her star. But over time, people pass by without paying much attention to it, showing how Elizabeth's fame has started to fade. After this, we are introduced to Elizabeth, the host of a TV aerobics show called Sparkle It Up. After finishing the show, she heads to the bathroom, only to find the women's restroom closed. She sneaks into the men's bathroom and hides when she hears someone approaching. While hidden, Elizabeth overhears the network president, Harvey, discussing his plans to fire her now that she's turned 50 and wants some other beautiful young girl to host his show. Later, she has a lunch meeting with Harvey, who is busy shoveling shrimp into his mouth, and during this awkward meal, he informs her that she is no longer needed. On her drive home, Elizabeth panics when she sees her billboard being taken down, causing her to lose focus and crash her car in a serious accident. At the doctor's office, a nurse, after completing her checkup, calls her a perfect candidate and secretly slips a flash drive into Elizabeth's jacket pocket. As she leaves, she's approached by a man named Fred, who recognizes her from high school. He tells her she's still the most beautiful woman he's ever seen and hands her his number, even though he seems a bit too enthusiastic and forward. At home, Elizabeth watches the video on the flash drive, which promotes something called the substance. A voice describes how the substance lets users live as a younger, improved version of themselves, switching between their younger and older bodies every 7 days, without fail. At first, Elizabeth hesitates, unsure if she wants to commit to this. However, feeling lonely and missing her days of fame and beauty, she decides to call the number. She receives a mysterious response, just an address and instructions to provide her own. Elizabeth gets an ID card and heads to a hidden building located in a dark alley. Inside, she discovers a deposit box that matches her number and opens it to reveal a mysterious green substance. Returning home, she injects herself with the green fluid she had seen earlier. Shortly after, Elizabeth collapses to the floor in agony as a large slit opens up in her back. From this wound, a younger, beautiful version of her emerges. This new woman quickly sews up the wound and applies a stabilizing fluid to both herself and Elizabeth's body to maintain balance. The young woman decides to call herself Sue, and soon becomes part of Elizabeth's former group after impressing Harvey. Sue loves all the attention she's receiving and spends her first week feeling really excited and full of energy. After a week, she switches back to Elizabeth, but she feels boring and ordinary again. The only important thing she has to do is go back to the network to collect her belongings from Harvey. When she transforms back into Sue, she secures a full-time fitness show, with Harvey accommodating her unconventional schedule. To maintain her secret, Sue constructs a hidden room in the bathroom to keep Elizabeth's body while she's unconscious. The loud sounds from her construction work annoy a neighbor, who comes over to complain. However, when he realizes that Sue is a beautiful young woman and not Elizabeth, he tries to flirt with her, but it doesn't go well for him. A few hours before she has to switch back, Sue decides to go out for the night. She meets a guy named Troy and decides to bring him home for a little romance, but things take a turn when she suddenly gets a nosebleed, signaling that her time is almost up. Desperate to extend her night with Troy, Sue cleverly recycles a stabilizer tube and takes some fluid from Elizabeth's body, hoping this will give her the extra time she needs to enjoy the evening. When Elizabeth wakes up, she notices that spending so much time as Sue has made her right hand look older and unhealthy. She quickly calls the number for the substance, but the person on the other end tells her that the changes are permanent and that she needs to maintain the balance. They also remind her not to think of Sue as a different person, since Sue is still a part of Elizabeth. After receiving her refill kit, she heads to a diner and spots an old man with a birthmark on his arm that looks just like the one on the nurse who suggested the substance. He scares her when he warns her about the bad effects of her younger self, asking if Sue has started to negatively affecting Elizabeth's health or life. Feeling frightened, Elizabeth bolts out of the diner only to be yelled at by Troy, who is there to pick up his motorcycle from her building, and leaves. Elizabeth goes to her apartment and starts searching her bag, where she discovers Fred's phone number. She calls and he invites for dinner. She then chooses to accept his invitation for dinner. He happily agrees and books a table for them. As Elizabeth prepares to leave, she notices a billboard advertising Sue's show right outside her window, which catches her attention. She keeps going back to the bathroom to fix her makeup, but after a while she feels increasingly annoyed and upset. Eventually, she decides to cancel the date and doesn't reach out to Fred at all. While filming an episode of Sue's show, She flubs a take after feeling a strange bulge against her backside. Trying to cover herself, she walks out of the room as they play back the footage, anxious to avoid seeing what she fears might be real. She rushes to the bathroom, where she pushes the lump up her leg and out of her belly button, only to discover it's an entire chicken leg. Frustrated, Sue also calls the number to complain about Elizabeth's binge eating and drinking habits, lamenting that she barely has time to enjoy her own life. Sue later arrives at the studio to discover that the taping for her show has been canceled. When she meets with Harvey, he excitedly tells her that she has become so popular that they want her to host a special New Year's Eve show. Thrilled, Sue accepts the offer and ends up spending even more time away from Elizabeth. When she finally returns to Elizabeth's body, she finds that she looks even older and frailer, struggling to move her legs. To keep herself occupied, Elizabeth starts using a French cookbook that Harvey had given her as a condescending gift. Meanwhile, her resentment towards Sue grows as she watches her on a talk show, where Sue mocks Elizabeth's old show, calling her Jurassic Fitness. After hearing all the lies Sue tells the reporter, Elizabeth becomes furious. In her anger, she decides to make her room a mess. She throws food everywhere, covering the kitchen and walls, creating a scene that looks like a chaotic animal house. Now it's Sue's turn to take over, and when she enters her apartment, she is horrified by the mess everywhere. In retaliation for Elizabeth's unhealthy habits, Sue spends the next 3 months extracting fluid from her, causing the area to turn into an infected sore. When Sue attempts to use the fluid one last time, it comes out looking necrotic and rotten. Concerned, she calls the number for help, and the voice informs her that she has reached the end of her allowed time in her younger body. It explains that the stabilizing fluid will reset when she returns to Elizabeth's body. With no other choice, Sue decides to return to Elizabeth's body. But when she does, she discovers that it has transformed into a horrifying, hunchbacked creature. Elizabeth makes the choice to end the substance, knowing it won't change what has happened to her, but will allow her to live her life as she is now. She prepares a black liquid and begins to inject it into Sue's chest, but at the last moment, she hesitates and withdraws the syringe. Sue suddenly wakes up and sees Elizabeth right in front of her. In a fit of rage, Sue lunges at Elizabeth, attacking her fiercely until she slams Elizabeth's face against a mirror multiple times, ultimately leading to her death. Sue then heads to the network to prepare for the New Year's Eve special, but things take a turn for the worse when her body starts to break down. She loses 3 of her front teeth, her fingernails start to peel off, and her left ear unexpectedly slips away. In a panic, Sue rushes back home, hoping to fix her situation. She discovers a vial of activator fluid that was meant for a single use. Believing it will help her regain a youthful body, she uses it, but instead it creates a horrifying creature named Monstrous. This bizarre being has multiple limbs, a mouth full of teeth, breasts, and the shocked face of Elizabeth on its back. Monstro returns to the stage wearing a poster of Elizabeth's face and squeezed into Sue's dress. As it gets closer to the audience, the face falls off, revealing a terrifying appearance that shocks everyone, including some kids. Harvey jumps in to fight Monstro and smashes its head with a microphone stand, but the head quickly grows back. One of its arms breaks off and sprays the crowd with a shower of blood, covering everything in a messy red liquid. Monstro manages to escape the studio, but then it collapses and turns into a pile of goo. From that goo, a strange mass forms with Elizabeth's real face on it. She crawls toward her star on the Walk of Fame, looking up with happiness and imagining sparkles falling around her. Elizabeth gives one last smile before she melts away into a puddle. The next morning, a floor scrubber comes in and cleans up the puddle, leaving no sign that Elizabeth was ever there. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this recap, make sure to like and subscribe for more captivating movie insights.